You leave quite a lot of space for us to imagine things. So can you just talk about creating a universe on stage?
I didn't want to be literal with the kind of narrative that I was developing with the dancers. I wanted things to be open-ended and give the audience the opportunity to form their own story or find a connection.
One of the elements that seems so clear to me is this use of time, because you allow a lot of time to occupy the space, and that we're able to look and take things in, and you don't rush anything.
Well, it's funny because the whole concept of time in the work came through when we were exploring and playing around with the masks, which happened in our second residency here at Szporer. And at that time, we were working in here, so there weren't any mirrors. We would just take each other's word on how that image looked and how our bodies felt we should be responding to these faces. And then, of course, when we started working with mirrors, you were able to see yourself, and it kind of shocks you, but it just inspired a lot of to play with in that theme of time.
But I'm wondering for you, how you think of working with these masks and what they provide to the piece.
I think that we can all, the masks that I found are so expressive. I didn't expect them to be so expressive. But when we were working on just creating movement and generating phrases and material, we weren't working with the mask for a while, but then we decided to put everything we did with the mask. Everything, the duets, and I had more masks that we didn't use in the work, but we thought, the duet, just put on a mask, see what it looks like. The trio, let's all put a mask and see what it looks like. And it just, it helped kind of set a tone, or for my, on my part, creating an hour evening kind of helped me understand where the journey had to go.
Did you feel that when you were working with the masks that you were dancing more fully?
I think it allowed us to remember to not have to be full. You know, I think seeing the reflection of ourselves with those masks on, it does something in your body. You just know that something that should be out, it just should be a little bit more restrained. Somehow it's psychological. It's really interesting what happens. And for Jermaine, for example, that whole opening solo, he goes back and forth, you know. Try it without the mask, and it's just not as effective, you know. So, yeah, in a sense, it allowed us to have comfort and simplicity.
Talk about the kind of development of the lighting, for instance, in this piece, and how it's enabled you to perhaps fulfill some of the dreams you had for the piece.
Well, I knew that I didn't want to use any side light, so I covered the entire space, and I knew that the more light we can get from above, the more weight that the work will get. But the more it would also feel like there's something about it being stuck somewhere, or for me, it felt like it was in your head. It was a dream or a memory, which for me is kind of what I knew that I wanted the work to take that journey, that it had the look of a dream or a thought. So that already, you know, working with Nick and just conversing on those themes.
I found it was quite interesting the way that you would use sounds, particularly the found sounds, to punctuate the scenes, so that you could overlap the scenes in a certain kind of way. We would see the presence of the other dancer who was just there, but it was the sound that kind of connected us in an immediate sense to this switch over, and yet it lingered.
Well, I wanted to emphasize the connections. I wanted to emphasize the connections that I believe we all have as humans. Whether it's your immediate connection to someone you're speaking to, or someone you love, or someone who made an object that you play with. There's endless type of connections. So I was trying to explore how I can do that in the work. And I would do that by attaching sounds that you will hear later on in the work, and in a moment that should be silent, but very faint. And I was just curious about what that would do to a spectator, to hear that, and if it's satisfying to see it become something, become a part of the work later on.
You have an amazing team of dancers, a really beautiful team of dancers. One thing that I was noticing is the quality of listening that goes on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Besides that they're amazing artists, they're also really good friends of mine. And that could be quite difficult to work with, but this group of friends are just incredible. And we spend a lot of time talking, and they like to make me vulnerable. they like to question things, and they want to know how I feel about things. And again, one of the raw ingredients of creating is time, right? And you need that time for trial and error, to come up with solutions, and then see the problems in those solutions, and so on. And you need that time. And I'm so grateful to have had those residencies, because by the time we were in New York City, we had that time to just talk and come up with solutions and come up with problems, because Anna felt a certain way. So yeah, and it made me lose sleep, but it's all knowledge, and it was all incredibly useful to me, and that's what they've been able to give me.
I want to go back in time a little bit. You're a little boy, Puerto Rico. The first impulse to dance.
I remember it being watching Sábado Gigante, which is like Saturday Night Live, sort of, but in Puerto Rico, in Spanish. And they had a live band, and I believe it was Hector Lavoe. It was a salsa group, and the backup dancers would sing, but also do their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I just picked it up. I just remember watching the television and picking that up and doing it in the next party we had, and it felt like I was. It was really organic to me, but the attention also felt like I was doing something interesting and cool. So it just inspired more to do more of that, kind of, to move more.
You're at a very interesting point in your career. You're advancing. You're called an emerging choreographer at this point, but there's lots of energy behind you. What's your goal?
Well, my goal, I would say, is to create a Sábado Gigante of my own. Create a place where I can inspire, perhaps be, not television necessarily, but do something for someone that wants to, that it makes them want to dance.
So it's a question about the degree to which you've got choreographed sections, improvised sections, structured improvised sections, how you work that way.
It's both. It's both, and that comes from generating movement through giving them a task to generate movement. So, for example, the questions were a way to create movement and allow them to be open-ended, so then I can come in and interject my movement in between, or tell them to allow that research to continue. Maybe the movement they came up with for how is good enough to keep asking that question: how, and allow them to just give them time to play with that, and then it goes to the music and how that works with the music, and how much time you have to play with how.
So it's a question about the construction of the arc of the evening and how you decided to unfold the piece.
That was actually the hardest part. We came up with all these short stories and all these little narratives, and then we would discuss, and we came up with just playing with where to place these stories. And I think we came up with 10 different versions, and I got a lot of anxiety from it. And then I went home one night and just really thought about it, and and we did came in one day with a new formula, and it just hit. It just worked.